So I want to thank you all for joining me today. As we have established, this is a brave space. So feel free to share your truth, however it comes out. So I know Carolina is a special place, and I'm curious on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your experience thus far? 1 being trash and 5 being excellent.
Okay. So so before I give my number, can I share with you all just a little bit of my story, my experience? Is that all right? All right, sure. So, here we go. When I first got here to Carolina, I was just so I was very all right. I was not expecting this experience in graduate school. And honestly, I wasn't very critical about what grad school was. And truthfully, I wish I had been a little bit more critical about what graduate school was just to, prepare myself. Because I work with this white professor and I appreciate them a lot. And we've learned a lot between the two of us. We have definitely learned a lot. And I feel that when George Floyd was murdered, that's when we really got to know one another. And so, my professor wanted me to be honest with them. And so I told them about how my graduate school experience had been. And I also told them how they had been making me feel for the last few years. And to their surprise, they were just like lost. And they were lost for a few good weeks. And they were just like, okay, how do we fix this relationship? How can we work on it? What do we need to do to just repair things? And then also my professor was like, holy shit, I have another student of color coming in, because I was their first student of color. And so this professor reached out to the brand new student and was just wanting to prepare them for what was to come. And my professor went to that new student of color and was like, listen, I know I fucked up. I've done a lot of things before, and I'm just working on things because I am a privileged person. I come from a very wealthy background. Okay, well, not wealthy, but a very well off, well off background. And sometimes I just say things that I'm not aware of. And when I think about it, my professor has made a lot of assumptions about me. When I got here, they figured, oh, you don't need any help. You're good on your, just on your own individual journey here. You don't need a lot of guidance, and that I didn't need a mentor at all, or that I really didn't care about topics about race, which I do. But they just didn't think it mattered that um, I think truthfully, some of this might be a bit of my own fault because I didn't tell them and I didn't say anything. Um, but I was really confused. I mean, I just got here to Carolina and I was like, I was trying to figure it out. I got here and they were all like, oh, this big project is going to be yours. It is your project. You can do your thing. And I'm very grateful for that because I've gained a lot of experiences, a lot of professional experiences. And I wouldn't have gotten that elsewhere, but I just I wish that I could have just had more guidance. I wish I could have had more help. I wish I could have had a mentor around wanting to work with me, because I felt like the whole time there was like this wall between us. And this is the thing. And so in my field, we're trained to think critically about things, but you have people that I feel like they're not picking up what's being put down at all. So we're trained to think critically in my field, but I feel as if nobody's thinking about that at all. And the truth is, if you had asked me this question, what I would rank this, my graduate experience on a scale, early on, I probably would have had a really, really negative response to it. Because honestly, when I first got here, I felt like I just saw a lot of hypocrisy, a lot of ignorance, and honestly, a lot of academics, scholars doing their work, doing their science, and just pretending that everything was okay and everything is all good. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, what's going on here? Am I crazy? but but I realize now that just being transparent is a little bit better. And that's very freeing. And truthfully, when you just don't give a shit, things just come on out and people hear you. So I would rank my experience a 4, a 4 now. And because I've just been a little bit more honest, and mainly I don't really care as much anymore. So a 4. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, very good. Very good. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. Okay. Well, as we've, heard from the gallery walk and reading the posters, it seems like attending a PWI, predominantly white institution, is its own experience. And especially when confronting faculty who are dealing with their own white privilege, white fragility, for the first time. And I'm curious, has anyone had any direct experiences or indirect experiences with white privilege specifically?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Hello. Oh, cool. It works. It's testing. All right. So it was around October, and we were going to this conference. And during the course of the conference, I guess people misconstrued behaviors or actions, and people got their feelings hurt. So during the conference, specifically, white people got their feelings hurt. And so we come back to the classroom, and I had gone down to Florida where the conference was with a group of women. It was 3 women, 3 Black women, and 1 white woman. And so we're hanging out in the classroom, and I notice there's a lot of tension. And I'm like, what happened?
Mhm.
So somebody who didn't go to the conference decides to take up a cause and explain to those of us that did go to the conference, particularly my friend group, that, oh, I'm a white woman. There are some things y'all need to know that I don't understand. I was like, okay. I was still trying to figure out, like, when these white feelings were hurt, what occurred, just trying to figure out what happened. But it just got worse. So some people in our class decided to spread a rumor, basically saying that my friend group were these mean and awful people and were basically silencing us and ignoring us. And it just got out of control, so much so that when we did well on exams that other people didn't, they accused the professors of favoring us. Yeah. So in our second year, a group of 5 students went to talk to the academic dean, who is, for lack of better words, in charge of the professors and classroom management. And so they had a discussion about how they felt that the professors were not advancing the white students as they should have, and that the professors were basically being reverse racist to the white students in the classroom. And I was trying to understand. I was trying to extend an olive branch in the conversation. But the white students in the class just refused to acknowledge that either, one, they had some kind of negative feelings toward the professors or the Black students in class, or 2, that when they were having conversations that they had never experienced their knowledge as deemed as inferior. And 3, when the professors tried to hold their ignorance accountable, they didn't like that, and they just pushed the blame onto everyone else but themselves when their white privilege was called to the carpet. And I don't know, but I guess they tried to use their white tears and their white privilege to basically belittle our excellent professors and cause harm to myself and other students in the class by ostracizing us and basically dismissing when we would point out things that were racialized, that were simply racist. And I guess all this started because somebody got their feelings hurt because they weren't the center of attention at a conference or in the classroom. It's wild. Yeah. Reverse racist. I was like, what?
The year of our Lord 2022.
I was trying to listen, but I don't know. Yeah.
Were there any lighthouses in human form for you? Any advocates or people that
Yeah,
advocated for
yeah, they were the professors, but the administration wasn't supporting them. And like, that's what I'm saying. The white students were never held accountable because of that. Yeah.
I've got two experiences that speak to this too, and their stories intertwine. So um, it started with this colleague of mine, let's call her Jane, who was willing to Jane was willing to put herself out there really publicly to advocate for more Black students in our program. They'd been advocating internally for a while and not seeing any results, so they published an article, an op-ed in the Daily Tar Heel, which thought the bravery of what it took to do that was huge, considering the politics that we're talking about. And I was there last year in the program, so like, trying to make some change. And the department was really defensive, really publicly. The dean wrote a critique of the article and sent it to everybody in our department, faculty, PhD students, staff, and was basically like, what are your thoughts on this? And immediately I start crafting this reply email that's like, you can't do this. But the whole thing lasted weeks, and it was, people saying problematic stuff, and then students responding on the thread. And some professors really showed up, and I'll always be grateful to them. And some of them really showed their colors. Like there was this one who, there was like a human rights campaign that was really specifically about Jewishness and the Jewish experience. And this professor sent an email out again to everyone to be like, this event is really important considering all of the conversations that we're having about diversity and race. And one of my friends, we'll call them Alex, responded to the dean in a conversation and was like, hey, this is like akin to saying, all lives matter. Like, yes, it's important. Yes, the Jewish experience, these people have suffered a history of discrimination, and that is important, but it doesn't belong in the conversation that was initially brought up by Jane. So the dean tells the professor this, and the professor sends an email again out to everybody calling Alex, my friend who brought it up, calling them unprofessional and anti-Semitic, which is fucked up because my friend is part Jewish. So I mean, the whole thing got sent to the ombuds to hash it out, but it was my student friend with this professor who was super tenured in basically this institution. So they were feeling really targeted, and as soon as classes were done, they left the state and finished their coursework at home. And this is fucked up to say, but I understand why the backlash to that first person, Jane, was so severe, like just as far as the way our society treats Black women. But for this to happen to a white person, the sentiment was just, fuck, we have to stay in line.
Yeah. You mentioned diversity. And I'm curious for all of you, with the passing of George Floyd and the university more recently doing a lot of communication around diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. Have you all seen any of those implemented in your programs or departments?
I've seen a lot of things.
Um, can y'all hear me? So I returned to grad school at 46. Father of a 2-year-old, a veteran, and someone who recently learned about their mental health issues and learning issues, including major depression, anxiety, and ADHD. So the program I chose was a master's in folklore. This is an opportunity for a non-traditional student like myself to contribute my diverse professional, creative, and life experiences to my work, especially with my interest in documentary filmmaking and working with communities. But it was in my program that I felt isolated and experienced challenges that impacted me mentally and emotionally. I knew that because I was the only male, the only person of color, the oldest member of my cohort, that there would be challenges. But even with the support and wisdom of valued resources and people that I trusted, I soon realized that it wouldn't be enough to create a sense of community or certainty or safety in the classroom. Right? I would sit for hours in graduate seminars, just feeling these intense sensations in my body, like holding my breath at times, to engage in discussions. Right? At times, I felt that the environment that was created by like a predominantly white female class, including a professor, made it more of a challenge for me to contribute to discussions. Because I was the only person of color, I was the only male, and I was the oldest one in the cohort, I wasn't sure which of these created tension in discussions about race or gender. And when I would feel this way, like my anxiety would cause these intense body sensations, and it'd be hard for me to think and at times even talk. The other students in the class shared that they felt that I was unhappy. And when I shared what I was feeling, they made it feel like I was the one with the problem. And I don't think they felt or understood their privilege. I mean, this only happened in classes with my cohort, but I felt that leadership could have been proactive and done more to create a sense of community for all of us. Um, so one example comes to mind. In a class with both undergrad and grad students, the grad students are asked to vote on readings for the undergrads to use for their final exams. Now, I don't remember exactly how many readings there were, but there were at least 20, and we had to vote on several. So there were two readings that I felt were important to me, one about being a veteran and the other about a Mexican healing woman. And the rest of the readings that the rest of the grad school or the class voted on didn't have any veterans or people of color. So I felt like it was not an inclusive reading list, right? So like I wanted to speak up, but my anxiety was already there and I didn't want to make it worse. Right? But there was another student, let's call them Adrian, not a member of the cohort, a different department. They noticed my reaction to the readings, and when I shared with them what I felt, they encouraged me to speak up and assured me that they would support me. So I spoke up, and the rest of the grad school or class, they voted against the readings I suggested, and the argument got heated, and they thought that I was accusing them of being non-inclusive. And I worked really hard to maintain with my anxiety and just explain. Um, sorry. Um, mm. And throughout this whole time, the professor was silent. And I felt like she could have intervened when there was obvious tension. At the end of the day, they voted to have one reading in. And after the discussion, the only person come to talk to me was Adrian, to thank me for speaking up and to apologize for my experience.
Thank you. Um, yeah, it's tough sometimes to be in a space that says they want diversity and then you bring diversity, but there isn't equity. There isn't inclusion.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Okay. Well, as an Asian American person, a lot of times we get recruited as part of these multiple categories of diversity and resilience to contribute to the academic environment. And so it's this lovely premise of this melting pot of all these different cultures and perspectives. And on the surface, it seems like this lovely premise, but it's really not. It kind of shatters when you realize that the institution that you're about to enter into isn't really built for equity in the first place. And especially with the last presidential administration emboldening hate, I experienced a lot of racialized hate crimes, and that's something that has personally happened to me and something that I saw firsthand all of last year. And so it happened with the first SARS, and it's happening with the second SARS and all of the SARS that are going to happen. And we get here and they're all just like, they're meaning, the administration, the faculty, whoever, the people that bring you here are like, we are so excited about you. We're excited about your diversity, these diverse individuals. We want you. Well, there are literally billions of people of Asian descent. Asian Americans are the largest growing racial demographic in the United States. So when you think about it, it's not that you want me, my diversity. It's that you want me to color your predominantly white institution, your predominantly white environment, your predominantly white department. And then we actually get here. And all of these things happen. Institutional responses to Silent Sam, the beginning of the pandemic, all of the racism and sexism that Nicole Hannah-Jones had to go through. All of this messaging that says, from the administration that says, we care about you, we care about your safety. But when it all comes down to it, the administration, the university at large, they don't give a shit about us. And that's a really, really challenging thing to sit with, especially when you first come here. And so I think when you're a person of color and when you're a queer person, you always kind of have to maintain this aura of hypervigilance. I'm not sure if anyone can relate to that, of constantly having to gauge how safe you are in a particular environment, constantly having to be looking outside of yourself and say, okay, when the university says that they care about your safety, whose safety are they really talking about? And so with all of that in mind, during my time in my particular program, I've experienced this culture of surveillance, this idea of the faculty and administration sending emails to each other about me, about my work, which is, that's something that's pretty common within a graduate department. You should be able to talk about the students you're working with. And that's pretty commonplace. But then I would hear about things in these roundabout ways, which I would qualify as like a hidden curriculum. Something would happen with my instructor in my particular course or area of study, and that instructor would email my program director, who would then email my advisor, only for me to find out it is all over a paper that I turned in a day late. And from my perspective, I'm fully aware of the consequences of my actions of turning that paper in a day late. I've read the syllabus. I know what it looks like. But then there's like this hidden messaging of like, I have to be able to disclose bit by bit and item by item my trauma and why I specifically can't turn in that paper, because obviously the stress of of my experience and my experience of being a person of color, a woman of color, a queer person, has to be delegated to this stranger. And I have to go into it detail by detail. And for what? For you to feel better? For you to feel like I'm contributing to you? To make you feel like you're doing something? I shouldn't have to do that. I should be able to send you an email saying that the paper is going to be a day late. From my experience, from my professional experience, if someone has an issue, you would talk directly to them. And that's where the roundabout curriculum comes in. And so, but it feels like whenever I came here that my experience is not normal, not respected, even though I fully have read the rules every single time. And so it's just something to process, both with the hypervigilance, both with the perception of self. And you have to recognize, like, okay, this might not happen everywhere, but the tragedy is that it could happen anywhere at any time.
I wonder what kind of institution this would be. If we were known for the healthy, supportive environments that we cultivate for future leaders and educators of the world, and not just be known for the research that we produce. Thank you.